If you remember, we broke for the laws of Pesach because we didn't want to start a new chapter before Pesach. Yeah, we're in the laws of Nitlat Yadayim and washing our hands for bread.
Before we continue, ask a review question.
Sure.
So 1 and 1, if you get the whole hand, is enough.
You're in the right chapter, because that's halakha number 2 of this chapter. Something with the Ruach HaKodesh meter.
It's working overtime.
It's a preview.
Doing that.
Siman Kuf Samech Bet, page 250. Siman Kuf Samech Bet, 162. If you have a phone and you want to use Sefaria, that's going to be Shulchan Aruch or HaShamayim, chapter 162. Hanotel, somebody washes his hands. Tzarich lehagbiha yadav. He must lift his hands after he washes them.
After.
Like this?
Oh, that's a great question. What is it? Lift like this.
A little bit, a lot.
Lift like that. Like, how are you lifting exactly? Rama Eden Haga. Dehainu Rashay Etzbeotav. His fingertips have to be, and then Maran continues, lemala. His fingertips have to be pointing up. So you wash like that. Why? Shelo yetzeu mayim chutz laperek. That water shouldn't leave the part of your hand where you're washing. V'yachzeru v'yitameu ta'yadayim, and they'll go back and make your hands impure again. Let's explain. You wash your hand once. You wash your hand twice. You then want to, walk to your towel. But some of that water is going to drip down on your palm. It's going to drip down on your... What's the case?
It seems the opposite.
Other way. Yes, the perek. Right. The water that's impure is dripping down. We don't want it to go back to the part of your hand that you wash. Remember, in Mikaradin, you really only have to wash from your knuckles up. So we want to make sure that the water that is here, that is tameh, doesn't go back into our hands, but it goes down off of our fingers. And that's why we lift our hands.
After you finish
washing. Haga, says the Rama, V'hu hadin im mashpilan mitchilat antila ad sofa, deshapir dami. There's another solution, says the Rama. Maran doesn't bring the solution, but this is Rama's solution. That you can wash your hands with your fingertips pointing down. You understand? You're going to wash. What happens at that point in time?
Oh, so then all the
water goes down on it. That's right. רק שיזהר שלא יגביה התחילה ראשי אצבעותיו ואחר כך ישפילם, דאז יצאו המים מחוץ הפרק וזרו את הידיים. You just have to do it in such a way that you're not like lifting and putting down your hands so that they keep moving around. Maran continues, והיינו כשאינו נוטל כל היד עד מקום חיבור היד עם הזרוע. That's so long as you're only washing until your knuckles, not until your wrists. Remember, because there are two opinions. Some opinions say you wash until your knuckles. Some say you wash until
wrists.
And we discussed that in the last chapter, what's the right way and the wrong way. But if you wash your hands until your wrists, then you don't have to lift your hands at all. Because Rama says, because nothing. Some people disagree with Maran here, says Rama. Maran says it's okay, but Rama says no, there are those who argue. If you pour a revi'it of water, how much is a revi'it of water? 3.5 ounces of water. And one pour. So not like I see some people do over there. They do it. That's not hand washing. You have to take 3.5 ounces of water and pour it at once on your hands. But let's say you did it on both your hands. So someone else here is washing your hands for you. Because there is no impure water at all. Why is there no impure water at all? Do you remember this halakha from chapter 158, Kuf Samech, Siman, Yud Aleph, Yud Bet, Yud Gimel? Maran there said, what did he say? Look with me. Let's go back. Remember what we said about review? Go to page. Don't beat yourself up. It's many, many pages ago.
244.
Remember on page 68, Maran says you make a blessing before you wash your hands. Remember that?
Mhm.
And the Rama says no, you can make a blessing even after you wash your hands because drying your hands is part of the mitzvah. From where does the Rama get that drying your hands is part of the mitzvah of washing your hands?
Must be because of this aspect of it dripping off
Very
and
good.
get rid of it all.
So if you touch the bread with wet hands, that bread becomes tameh, impure. And therefore, in order to be able to eat bread, you must dry your hands. So the Rama says, so long as you didn't dry your hands and you make a blessing, you've still made the blessing before the mitzvah is over. Because you have to still dry your hands.
Weird logic.
It is weird logic. It's kind of like making a blessing in the middle of the mitzvah.
Right.
But it's better than making a blessing at the end of the mitzvah. But then you remember the Rama backs down. The Rama says, but even if you dried your hands, you can still make a blessing. Because for some reason, the Rama, we don't know why, the Rama does not feel bound to this Talmudic rule that you have to make blessings before you do the mitzvah. Even though Talmud says that, the Rama says that, Talmud says it 5 times.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the Rama has the same law by the laws of shechita. If you look at the laws of slaughtering, the Rama says, what happens if you slaughtered your goat and then you're carrying him home on your shoulders and you realize you forgot to make a blessing on the shechita? So Maran will tell you, big deal. You already did the mitzvah. As long as you did it right, the blessing doesn't really make a difference. Okay, you missed out on a blessing. But the animal's still kosher. The Rama says, no, you just stop, say the blessing, keep walking. You're making a blessing on the slaughtering of the animal. You already killed the animal. He's already on your shoulders. You're already halfway home. I don't have a good answer for you. In our Bet HaMidrash, we have a big question mark. Clearly, the Rama does not play by the same rules as the Talmud does, and we don't know why. Because the Talmud is very explicit on the exceptions to the rule of making a blessing before you do any mitzvah. Yes?
If you use the right amount of water, when you wash your hands, the water on your hands is tahara.
Very good. That's
even if you touch the bread, it's not going to make it
tahara. Look, so now look with me on page... oh, that's not a commentary. On page 83. Maran says, over here, on page 83 at the top of the page, V'nagevem hetev kodem shivtza. You have to dry your hands well before you do hamotzi. What does iftza mean?
That's like an egg.
Beitzah, that's with the hay.
Oh.
The root there is betzah though, but it's not the same. This means to tear. Before you tear the bread, or rip the bread. This whole slicing bread with a knife at the Shabbat table is it's not a Jewish custom. I mean, now it is, but it wasn't. We didn't have bread that was sliceable with a knife. I tried it on Shabbat now. We had these big pitas, lafas. I tried to cut it with a knife. It doesn't make sense to cut with a knife. It takes so much time and so much effort, it doesn't do anything. You get little strips of bread. You just hand around the bread, everyone rips their piece off.
It's soft.
It's soft. So before you rip the bread, you must dry your hands well. Sha'ochel b'li niguv yadayim, because anybody who eats without his hands is being dried. Ki'ilu ochel lechem tameh. It's like he's eating impure bread.
Like he's eating it.
Right, that like is interesting. And then on page 86, Maran writes another halakha. Hamatbil yadav. If someone, what's the root here of hamatbil?
To like toivel, like
Yeah, that's the word. The word tet bet lamed tvila, like what you do in a mikveh. So if you immerse your hands, yechol lechol b'lo niguv, you could eat your hand or your bread with soaking wet hands. If you stick your hands in the ocean, or I don't know, that's not the ocean. Let's say a mikveh. You stick your hands in the mikveh. You don't have to dry your hands. You could be eating a soggy pita if that's how you like it. And that's okay. There's no tumah here. What do you see from here? It's not the wetness that makes the bread tameh. It's the fact that there's still water that is dirty on your hands.
Right.
That's what makes the bread tameh.
It's very useful when you go to like simchas or houses where there's like 50 people washing in one towel.
Right.
Because you can't get your hands dry.
Don't touch that towel. In fact, that towel might make you have to wash your hands again. Have you ever smelled your hand after that towel?
Oh, it's bad.
Someone told me in their yeshiva they just made al nitilat yadayim on the towel because it was so wet. It's not a halakha.
So you use
That's
your
a-
neighbor's shirt.
Exactly, that's right. This whole
It's the Jewish conga
idea
line.
of tuma water only exists when you're washing with
One
very
hand
little
dries
water,
the other.
and the tameh water is still hanging around your hands. Kind of like what the people do by mayim achronim. You ever see them do that? I don't do that, but they do that. They pour like little drops of
Drops,
water in their hand.
right.
They smear it all in. All they're doing is
Smearing the tumor.
smearing all their tuma all over their hands. That's all that's happening in this process. It doesn't wash because the water that washed is still there. Yes? V'hu hadin, the same is true, says Maran, lenotel yadav bevat echat, a person who washes his hands in one pouring, v'shofech alehem revit mayim bevat echat, and he pours a revi'it of water, 3.6 ounces. It's not a lot of water. On his hands in one sitting. So he puts his hands together and someone pours on his hands a revi'it of water. How many people wash like that here? Nobody. Or shenatal yado echat, or you washed one hand, v'shafach aleh haravit, and you poured on it a revi'it of water, 3.5 ounces of water. V'chen shafach et chaverta, and you also pour a revi'it of water on the other hand. So you pour on one hand, you pour on the other hand, and you have now washed with a revi'it of water on each hand. You do not have to dry your hands. All you have to do is just go to the bread and make a hamotzi and eat the bread. So according to the Ramah, who says the only reason you can make a blessing after you wash your hands is because drying your hands is still part of the mitzvah, because you can't eat the bread until your hands are dry. All the people in the world that you know that are making a blessing after they wash their hands, and they tell you, well, because the Ramah says drying your hands is part of the mitzvah. Yeah, it's great. Read 2 sentences later. By the way, you see the Ramah argue anywhere here? There's no Rashi script. The Ramah doesn't argue with this halakha. I mean, the Ramah agrees that once you wash with more than enough water, you don't have to dry your hands anymore. In which case, all those people who make a bracha after they wash their hands, even according to these poskim here, are saying a blessing in vain. Because you don't have to dry your hands anymore. Remember that. Even the halakha that everyone is relying on from the Ramah is not actually what they're doing today. It's for this reason the Chachamim are very careful when you learn halakha. Not every person should be responsible. The word in Arabic, lihidamot milta lemilta. It takes a certain analytical skills to be able to compare two similar cases and draw conclusions through that comparison. Not everybody knows how to compare things properly. And sometimes people go, oh, well, that's what he was talking. It's not what he was talking about. It's not what he was saying. He was saying something different. You have to look again what it says over there. Recently, someone tried to do that with me. That I permit gelatin. Not me. Yonatan Halevy doesn't permit anything. Chavod Yosef permits gelatin to be eaten, even if I'm not kosher animal. So their complaint at me was, you're just relying on Rabbi Yosef without looking at his sources. He was talking about gelatin that comes from the bones of animals. But gelatin that comes from the skins of animals? How could he permit such a thing? The Mishnah says that the pig skins are different than any other animal skins. That those skins, they retain the status of meat, even though they're not meat. It was a cute letter. But all he did was take a snapshot of Rabbi Yosef's letter, where he says, gelatin made from the skins and bones of non-kosher animals. It says it in the intro, like that's he's talking about, not just the whole question was a lie. The Gaon of Vilna has a famous story like that, where he asked it was an acceptance exam to his yeshiva. And he said, tell me, why in the Mishnah in Masechet Megillah it says that this can happen on the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th of the month? And over here in the other Mishnah, talking about something else, it says it can only happen on the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th. Why doesn't it mention the 11th and the 15th? He said, give me an answer to that question, I will let you into my yeshiva. They say this young rabbi, he came back the next day, he gave him a 2-hour elaboration why according to this teaching, according to that teaching, God says, come back again. That's not a good enough answer. Come back tomorrow. The next day, a whole week he was giving him answers. Brilliant answers. Why the second book skipped 2 dates that the first one didn't have. The last day of his exams roll around, and the Gaon of Vilna says, come, bring me the books. Come. You see, the first book says the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. Come now, read to me. What does it say in the second book? And he reads the 11th, 12th, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. He said they say the same exact thing. When you learn Torah, look at what it says. Don't look at what you think it says. There was no contradiction between these two books in the first place. How many rabbis wrote books trying to reconcile, why does the Rambam permit something over there that he prohibits over there? And along come the Yemenite Jews with handwritten manuscripts of the Rambam. The Rambam permits over there and permits over there. It's a typo in the book that was printed in Vilna. Or he prohibited here and there. And so all of the books that you wrote to explain the seeming contradiction of the Rambam, it's an exercise of futility. There's nothing to it. How many people create halachot because they're incorrectly applying things from other places to the wrong scenarios? Almost all of the laws of kashrut that you observe with the dishes and the utensils in your home are learned from incorrect applications of halakha and the Shulchan Aruch to your modern day kitchen. My father sent me an email this week with 7 or 8 images of historic knives throughout history, different places, different periods of knives. You've never seen such ugly things in your whole life. You see a knife today, like a stainless steel, smooth knife. You've never had such a knife before. I mean, maybe the samurai warriors. Because those guys, they kept bending and what they did is they condensed the metal in their knives. Like condensed metal is also very similar to stainless steel, in which it doesn't absorb like regular metal does. But all of the halachot the Maran says about metal or about ceramic, it's talking about porous metal and porous ceramic. The Maran's whole law there is it's a meat knife because it absorbs flavor of the food into the knife. You go to the store today, find me one knife in the whole country of the United States of America. I'm not a real knife, like one that you buy today, not from a museum somewhere. In which you can cut something and then taste the food that you cut inside of the knife afterwards. So what happens is that all the people talking about the laws of kashrut, it's a fairy tale game in their head. This is a meat cup. How could this be a meat cup? There's nothing meat because the taste is absorbed into the walls of the cup. Where? Look, it's a glass cup. You see this? There's nothing absorbed at all inside of this cup. How could you possibly teach Am Yisrael the laws of kashrut when you don't even understand what you're talking about?
Even if it's boiling?
Yeah, try it. It's very easy. Go to the store and ask for the spiciest peppers they sell in season right now. Like past habaneros, past, like whatever, I don't know, ghost peppers, whatever you're going to do. And dice them up so the seeds are, make it as spicy as you can. And then boil it in hot water inside of a cup. And then wash it out. Listen to me, even without soap. Wash it out. Well, just with water. Well, you know what well means? It doesn't mean like, in yeshiva when you just wash it with a thing like that. Well, and then boil water inside of there. Is there anything not kosher about peppers? You could try this. It's not like you're checking it with pig. Make a shekel and drink the water, hot water. And if you taste habanero peppers inside of your cup, I'll give you $50. It's on camera. It's not going to happen. It's not a reality. Our HaShamayim were not stupid. Our HaShamayim knew what it says inside of halakha. It's those who apply incorrect applications of the halakha to things that are not. It's not. Maran wasn't talking about this. Maran talks. You were talking about kashrut. Maran talks about metal. He talks about wood. He talks about ceramic. He talks about glass. He says about metal that metal absorbs flavor. It's porous. He says about ceramic that ceramic absorbs flavor, and it's impossible to get it out because the temperature you need to kosher the ceramic with, it'll break. And he says about glass that glass is not porous at all. And therefore you can have meat and milk and kosher and not kosher all in the same glass, as long as you wash it between. Use soap. That's what Maran is saying. When Maran says those things, he's not telling you this is the law of metal, and this is the law of ceramic, and this is the law of glass. He's telling you this is the law of absorbent materials. This is the law of absorbent materials that cannot be kashered because they're too fragile to be kashered. And this is a law of any material, which is like glass, that doesn't absorb. That's what Maran means when he writes Shulchan Aruch. But what's happened in the last 100 or 200 years is that we've become Karaites. Rabbinic Karaites. It's interesting. It's the other way around. The Karaites were so literally interpreting Torah texts that they ignored rabbinic teachings. We are so literally interpreting rabbinic texts that we're not thinking anymore.
Part of that is the classes themselves. It's like very few teachers, they lecture. They lecture to a group of people, but they don't actually have the students with the books in front of them to learn the different opinions and how they're acquired.
I once had a rabbi who told me that if you go to a class and there are no sources, step out.
It's like
It's not worth your time to sit in a class where there are no sources that you can analyze
it's like
yourself.
going to a science class or a medical class
Not a
without.
textbook.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there to listen. That's right. Just don't. I'm not hiring you for surgery. That's right. And more than this, though, and I'll tell you, I wrote an article about this on my website. And a lot of what rabbis feel is, forgive me for the term, but it's an emasculation of rabbis. Not for the male tense, but most rabbis are taught from a very young age in yeshiva that you're never going to be able to change anything. You're never going to be able to think differently than we've conditioned you to think. Don't you dare try to challenge the authorities on this and authorities on that. There are great rabbis that you will never... The whole education is built on this. By the time you put a rabbi like that out, I mean, think about this. Today I do Giyur. Yeah, I have a bedin for Giyur. We have people in our community that 10 years ago I had to send to other people because I was taught, not in my yeshiva in Israel, but the feeling in the San Diego community is that there's not one rabbi in San Diego who can actually do a Giyur. You have to send them to LA. Who decided? Who made that rule? And so what happens is that every time you talk about conversion in the Jewish community, what happens? All the rabbis here go up in arms because they are emasculated in this area. They're not able to do any kind of... They have no control over Giyur. And then along comes some fool and says, oh, I can do Giyur. The first reaction to someone who can do something you can't, it's what I call rabbinic violence. The reaction is violent because you're saying you're better than me? No, I'm not actually. I'm saying we could do it together if you want. You could do it too. You can learn how to make your own matzot. You don't have to buy what they sell 3 years old in Ralph's. You can learn how to do it. It's not so complicated to make a flat cracker. I mean, come on. They're more complicated than baked goods. Ask any Sephardic woman before their child's bar mitzvah. All those little pastries. Those things are complicated. I'll never be able to do that. But a flat cracker that doesn't taste good? Come on. But we've been taught you can never make your own matzot. Of course. So the feeling is those matzot must not be kosher. Because if I can't do it, then nobody can do it. It's a really childish reaction to the way... Instead of saying, look, maybe I can learn how to own my own halachot. That would be fantastic. So you're right. Now back to where we were supposed to be. And I don't have a watch somewhere here.
250.
Oh, perfect. I have just 3 or 4 more minutes. And let me go back. What page we're on? 250. So let's read this now that you understand what we said about the revit of water. So it's in the second paragraph there on page 250. After the little Rashi script, the last 3 words in line is V'chen im shafach. V'chen im shafach. Al shtei yadav. Revi'it b'fam achat. If you poured a revi'it of water on your hands at once. Kevan de'en sham mayim teme'im klal. Because there is no tameh water there at all. Now that makes sense? Eino tzarich lehagbi hayadav. You don't have to lift your hands. V'chen hamadbil yadav, and somebody therefore who dips their hands in the mikveh instead of washing it with a cup of water, eino tzarich lehagbi yadav, also does not have to lift up your hands, because remember what Maran said there? If you dip your hands in the water, then you don't have to dry your hands before you eat the bread. Haggah says Ramah, v'yesh omrim, and some say, dim shofech al yadav shlosha pamim, en tzarich lizaher b'chozeh, that if you're the kind of person who washes 3 times on each hand, it's the first time you're coming across this idea of 3 times. It's going to be in the second halakha. What Zev mentioned, Maran is going to talk about 3 times in just a second. If you wash for 3 times, then you don't have to worry about lifting your hands, and that's the reason why people are lenient about this. Now, does the Rama agree with this opinion? Not really. He quotes it as some say that because people wash 3 times, that's the reason, that's the justification why they don't lift their hands. But technically, according to Maran, you have to lift your hands. Now you'll see, and we'll probably should do this together, and I'm sure that it'll be in one of the footnotes here. The Kabbalists have a completely different understanding of why you're lifting your hands after you wash. Se'ui dechem kodesh, lift your hands in holiness and bless Hashem. That already, I'm not telling you now, I'm not a Kabbalist, I'm not going to go down there. According to halakha, the reason we lift our hands is in order not to contaminate our fingers all over again. Because of that, if you wash with a significant amount of water, there's no need to do that. Just like if you wash with a significant amount of water, you don't have to dry your hands before you eat bread because your hands are already clean enough to be able to eat without having to dry them. Any questions? All right. We're gonna,
Anyways, if you don't use enough water, whether or not you lift your hands, you're gonna, even if you don't lift your hands, you're gonna have problems, right? Because those
right, about the bare minimum amounts of washing your hands.
Right.
But he mentioned about 3 times washing your hands. You're just talking about bare minimum.
Right.
If every time you wash your hands, you wash like this part and then this part and then this part, it doesn't count at all as if you didn't even wash your hands once. Because it has to be that in each hand washing, there's enough water to fulfill the obligation of washing your hands. So if you have a limited amount of water, it's better to wash once on each hand than to wash 3 little bits on each hand, because that doesn't count. And netilat yadayim l'sirugin. Chachamim say you're not able to wash your hands in steps. It has to be done at once. You can do it at once 3 times over, but you can't do it a third, and a third. It just doesn't work that, or half and half. You can't do it that way, and therefore it's important to be careful about that. God willing, tomorrow we'll do the next halakha, and then we'll go through all of the footnotes tomorrow. If you just join me for a minute, we're going to count the Sefirat HaOmer. So on page 230.
Quick question.
Yes.
Quick question. I know it's an extension, but Birkat Kohanim.
Okay, Shulchan Aruch. Yes.
Birkat Kohanim. How does one properly wash their hands?
It's a fantastic question. The real question is, that's right. No, that's right. Hold on. That's exactly. Well, we don't wash our feet anymore. So the reason we don't wash our feet is because we claim because they're covered and because we keep our feet clean and they're not showing the bit of knesset. For that reason, we don't wash them. The same logic would apply to your hands, which, unlike your feet, you probably washed at home before you got to the synagogue. So really, your hands are clean. There are 2 real reasons why we wash Kohanim's hands. Sometimes we're concerned that Kohanim, maybe they didn't wash properly at their house. So now we're getting them to wash properly, with a cup and 3 times and those things. The second is the Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Cairo. He brings, this custom originates in Spain for Levi'im to wash the Kohanim's hands, kind of as a hope that one day we'll return to the temple and the Levi'im will be able to wash the hands of the Kohanim again. But really, according to Halakha, so long as a Kohen, some point before he goes up there, does his own hand washing, he doesn't have to let anybody wash his hands. It's not a requirement. Yes?
Yemenites never do it.
Yemenites never did it, right? Because this custom happened after the Jews
Not
of
even
Yemen left.
self-service.
My grandfather from my mother's side was a Kohen.
Did he
My
wash
father
his own
was a
hands?
Levi. Wash all the Kohanim. All my
They
uncle.
washed their own hands?
They washed
Yes,
their
meaning
own
they did wash
self-service.
their hands, but they did it on their own.
Right.
You should know there's some cases where that's important. There's a halakha that a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, cannot wash an ignoramus's hand. What does it mean, ignoramus? Ignoramus means like he's ignoramus doesn't mean people like us. It means a Kohen that the only claim to fame is that he was born a Kohen. That's the only thing he has on us. In that kind of situation, it becomes very problematic for a Levi to wash Kohanim's hands. Remember in Baltimore, there were some of the rabbis who were Levi'im, and they would wash only the hands of other rabbis who were Kohanim, not to violate that kind of situation. So here, the reason I don't wash Kohanim's hands is not because I consider anybody an ignoramus, is only for the very simple reason that in my old synagogue, when I used to walk out to wash Kohanim's hands, chaos would ensue. And therefore, I made it a rule that as a rabbi, I never leave the synagogue to wash anybody's hands. I stay here as long as there's another Levi, let the other Levi take care of that situation. So, Baruch Hashem, we have 2 veteran Levi'im that I'm not concerned about. But washing is like any other washing, which is at least past the knuckles.
That's enough.
That's
That's
enough.
it.
And the Muslims still wash their feet.
Yes, and many Jews used to wash their feet too, and especially when we wore sandals without shoes, without socks. In those cases, you can't come to the Knesset with mud on your feet.
Did the
We used to-
Rambam try to bring that back also, along with the
The Rambam
frustration?
did. The Rambam did that. He didn't bring it back. I mean, that was the custom pretty much until the times of the Rambam. Yeah, to wash. And when we started switching the way we dressed, that's when
Not the
Well, those
rugs
are
and
the-
the sandals. Yeah.